Hey, Composing Gloves here, and today we're going to be looking at applying text events to your song. So I'm going to assume you've got a little jam right now, like you've written a song based on the last stuff we did. So you can see here I've got somewhat of a song dialed up here. It's not done yet, but I'm using these little text events everywhere, and each one has its own special property. And so in Renoise, there's like a series of codes. I don't know them all. I know a fair amount of them, but not all of them. So I'm only going to share a couple with you and just the way I use them. So these codes are also done in hexadecimal. Now we've already talked in hexadecimal. So regular decimal counting counts from 0 to 9 before we need a second digit, right? Because if you want to go above 9 to 10, you need 2 digits. Well, in hexadecimal, you can go from 0 to 15. And in order to get to 16, you now need a second digit. And so as a result, you get a much wider range. You can actually represent over 250 values with just 2 digits. Where in decimal, the 2 values, you can only represent 100. So it's a very, very powerful system. And I encourage you to sit down and write out, count all the values you can from 0 to FF in hexadecimal, because that just made it make so much more sense to me. Like that's what I had to do to really get intuitively. But there are a couple of things you can always remember with hexadecimal. Number one is 80 is halfway, 40 is 1/4 of the way, and C0 is 3/4 of the way, with FF being the maximum value. So just remember the 80, 40, and C0 thing as half, quarter, and 3/4. And then FF is your max. So here's an example of some text I'm using to control something pretty specific. And so we have these effects columns, and in these effect columns, they recognize particular commands. In this case, I am using 2 at the same time. I am raising my pitch up by 1, and the pitch up command, if it follows by 2 zeros, that means repeat the previous value. Vibrato works the same way. And so right now, each line, another thing you have to know about these textual commands is each line has a specific number of ticks. And so we have a certain number of lines per beat, which we're familiar with. But if we go into song settings, song options, we have a ticks per line. And a lot of these effects will divvy up the number of ticks per line. Bless my soul. So ticks per line, important note, just know that right now there are 12, but you can change it, and that will therefore augment how some effects work. So let's just go down what I have in this track. So the beginning, the first pattern sounds like this. So we just da 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 da, and then we have this like crazy blip, blip, blip. So the what's happening is this is an arpeggio. So for the first set of ticks, I'm not sure. I think it divvies them up evenly or whatever. But first, it plays the tone it's originally at. So it's playing the D5, and then for this one line, for 12 ticks, it's gonna play 3 notes away from D. So this is a pretty music theory intensive exercise, but 3/7 is a minor code chord. So maybe I'll have a whole series where I delve into using these in a song rather than just explaining what they do. But 3/7 is a minor code chord, and so it's going to play D, F, and then A. So first it's going to play 3 notes away from D, then it's going to play 7 notes away from D, and then it's going to go back to D by the next line. And that's why it has those little blips right there. This is a very ancient command. It was a command used because back in the day, you only had 4 tracks. You didn't have enough memory to support any more. So you had to figure out how to get your entire chord into one track. And so this was a technique used to do that. And now it's sort of got a staple of its own. It's its own sound unto itself. But this way you could fit in a whole chord in a single note. So I use it here as an embellishment. And then, so that's the arpeggiation command. Common one, so 4/7 would be a major chord. And then if you did like 4/9, that would be a first inversion minor chord, major chord. It would be a first inversion minor chord, I believe. But anyways, you can go through here and you can figure out all the mumbo jumbo of the way the chords work. And so this has actually strengthened my theory quite a bit when I had to do this, because I was like, man, because you think in theory, you think in terms of intervals, like minor second, minor third, major third, that mumbo jumbo. You don't think in terms of number of half steps. So I've been forced to think differently about things. The next thing, especially with inversions. So that's interesting. And you might occasionally see an A or an F, because I need intervals that are above 9. I need like 10 and 11. So you'll see A or F there for like 7 chords or something. There's other ways you can combine this with other notes and get more complicated sequences, but it's not. I'm not going to dive into that right now. I don't use that that often at this point in time. Then we have this U. The U stands for pitch up, and I had to open up a second effect column, FX column, so that I could incorporate them at the same time. And so it's going to pitch up, and then I believe when it's 1, that means pitch it up by 1 tone. And then over here, when this value is 1 and this is 0, I believe that's a quarter of a tone. So there are specific values for each one. But the point is I have to continue this, and the 0, 0 means repeat the previous value. So it pitches up 1 here, another one, another one, another one. And so it will glide up to this C. Not necessarily to the C, but it'll continue to glide up, and then it reaches the C, it'll play that C. And so that's what's going on there. It's not too complicated. It's just I never had someone really just explain it in a way that just made sense to me. Over time I was messing with it, and eventually I got what I was trying to do, because each command is really different. For example, the U command, both these values, an XX value. So you'll see in the Renoise manual or whatever, it'll be like UXX, and that means that both those values contribute to one number. And the A, this will be the value XY, where each of these values is it does something different in the effect. So for example, the 3 will move it up 3 notes, and the 7 will move it up 7 notes. It's not going to move a total of 37, which in hexadecimal is way more. These are separate numbers, where these are considered as one number. It's sort of like 1 and 2 being considered separate numbers instead of being considered the number 12. That's what I'm saying. So there are commands that will do things differently, but that's those 2 commands. You could hear that's my example of it. And I use this example again later on to create more interest. It is right. I have a couple good examples in here of this, but here it is again, but this time it's to add a very transitional elements. Check it out. So you see, that's cool to me. So, and then all these little bloop, 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 bloop. That's those little commands there. So now you know where those come from. Now, if we jump over to, let's do another one. So you see here we have a D. So if U means up, D is going to mean down. So this is pitching down by 1. And in this case, I copied the 1 across, but these could be 0, 0, 0. It would do the same thing because my first value is 0. So if I were to play this little section right here. So, let's go back and listen to that one more time. And so that's what's going on there. It's just the opposite of the up command. So these, you write out, what I typically do is I write out my line. This time I have like harmony and junk. And as I'm going, I'll find moments where this really works well. If I go over to, let's go over to the drum pattern. You notice I have this A80. And remember, in hexadecimal, 80 is halfway. So it's similar to how 50 is half between. It's the same thing. 50 is halfway from 0 to 100. 80 is halfway in hexadecimal from 0 to FF. So we have these additional columns. And so whenever you select a track, you can choose to reveal them down here with these buttons. So because they're commands that are so common that they just have extra columns. And sometimes they do different things than what their effect command version would do. So there's like a volume effect command version where it's specifically done to fade in and fade out. And then there's just a regular volume command. So they interact with Renoise differently. I encourage you to just go watch the official Renoise videos on those, or to read the manual and do experiments. Experiments solve like 90% of your issues. And this is just a general introduction to this stuff. But if we have a volume here, so I could change the volume. We've already looked at this one in the video where we made that small little loop. But we can also do panning. That's a very common one. So you can change your panning. And delay. Now delay is the one I have over here. And this is where, even though my line per beats is 4, I can delay it. And by delaying it, I can get that do-do-do. Even though it would be do-do-do, I'm able to get on my kick, ba-bum-bum. Check it out. So do-da, do-do-da. This hasn't been mixed or nothing yet. It's in the drum loop. I'm going to vary it in some places. But check it out again. So that would not be possible before. Without that, if we got rid of it. Edit mode. So you see, not nearly, nope, not cool. But this now it's cool. And then if I were to put a 4 there instead, that would be a much shorter delay. So it's closer to the original. If I were to put a C there, it's like bump. So I don't dig that one for this particular one. I like 80 the most. So that is what the delay. So you'll see me use this a lot for those sorts of rolls and things. So now you can begin to shift notes and delay notes. So if you wanted to write a grace note, you could. It doesn't always work, but if you don't need that spot for a 16th note, you could have a note here and a note here and delay this one so that it comes up right before this note starts, and that will cause a grace note. Bum, dum, bum, 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 bum. You could just use delays to accomplish that instead of changing the resolution of your grid with lines per beat. So that's a really nifty way of doing things. And that's mostly what I want to say. There are a couple ones that if we were to come down here, add a couple more. Let's say that I had a so let's put down a note. So if I wanted, so for example, I could put D1 or D2 and it will glide up very quickly. Or I mean down very quickly. If I put like an 8, it'll be much more severe. Now I could put an up there instead, and now it'll go up. And these values are just repeating it. But if I changed one of these values, it would change the rate at which it glides up. So all these things are kind of done to taste. We also have a glide command that allows us to glide from one note to the next. There are times when I'll grab this versus another one, and it's a little confusing. I'm not going to go into all the details of it, but basically you just put a little G down, and then you enter a value in, and it will glide. Sometimes it will affect your note value. Watch, check it out. So you see that was the wrong note. But if I go higher than the interval is, it will go to the right note. And if I go 1, see, that's the wrong note. So the glide command is confusing. I'm going to encourage you to just go research it on your own. I don't want to explain everything right here. We could also put in our ARP command that we learned about. So we could put in the A and then maybe put in a 3, 7. So that's the ARP command. Also, we could put in a... So, the vibrato command is one that I grab a lot too. So if we put down a V, now let's get rid of this. So the V, the 0, 0 will repeat the previous value. The first value is the speed. So I'm going to put that as A, which would be 10. And then the second value is the depth of the vibrato. So I'll put down a 4, and it'll sound like this. If I increase the depth to be something ridiculous, it sounds, yeah, that's not cool. And then I could also make the speed very slow. And so you see, you have all these different effects available to yourself. So this is just an introduction to the power you have here. Now, what you have seen me do a couple times is, let's go to a new track. And let's add in a, let's pull up a sample. You're able to use a couple sample commands to... Let me just load up a sample. I am half distracted. So female, why not? Okay, whoops, that's wrong. All right, let's go up to exit edit. So that's what our sample is, right? So we're gonna put that down. And what you're able to do now is, as we learned, we can trigger back things here in a really funny way. One of them is you can put slice markers in. And as a result, you're able to write in commands that will trigger certain slice markers, or you can use slice offset. So you see up here how we have our hexadecimal. This is like a map to tell us, oh, if I want to start from this point in the sample, I'll put a B1. So let's go in here and say, okay, I want to slice offset. That's what the S is for, B1. And so I can continue to repeat that. And so every line, this value will be updated at B1. So it'll try to play through for 12 ticks, because that's how many ticks we have. And it'll go B1, B1, B1 over and over and over. And this one, I believe you do have to copy. I haven't experimented. So let's bum 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 bum. Okay, now let's go look at it. It's pretty short. Oh, I forgot. So with the slice offset value, you also have to trigger the note repeatedly. So I'm thinking of re-trigger is what I'm thinking of. So here we trigger the note repeatedly, and every time it'll update at this value. And so we could change this value to be like B6 instead. And then let's do 5 and then the 2, 3. So we can get like weird and stuff. Another cool one you can do is you can do re-trigger, and this will re-trigger your sample. Well, a really quick note on this one too. So if you were to do this for a long period of time, like let's just copy and paste this a couple times. And then hit shift page up, control C, page down, page down. Okay, so we have this, and what we could do is we could use our interpolate command. So our bottom one would be S0 at the top, F at the bottom, FF. And now we're going to hold down Shift Alt End to select the values. And now we're going to interpolate them. So now it's going to slowly trigger further down our sample here as each note gets triggered. So the faster our tempo, the faster they'll be triggered back, and the closer it will sound to as it would in real time. If that makes any sense. Check it out.
Do you ever wonder who you are?
So you see, it sounds like all messed up because we're updating the value, but it has to go back a little bit. Like it doesn't ever quite line up with where it's supposed to be. So you get these cool choppy effects. So let's talk about retriggers. So I'm going to Shift Home Delete and put down our sample. Now we can use retrigger. So what retrigger does is it will re-trigger the sample. So if we put down some values here, and we could get wild here. I just put down a bunch of like random ones for now. And you'll begin to see it like just go back, it'll go crazy. And then what you could do is you could combine this with offsets and get some really powerful mumbo jumbo. So we could be like, oh, okay, let's have the C, and then we'll trigger it again here. And then on this one, we will put our S values, and we'll say update at 555, 556, and then on this one we'll do update at, so our slice offset, so it's going to shift the offset, but then it's going to re-trigger at that offset. Well, actually, in this case, I think it'll re-trigger first, then do the slice offset. This would be an interesting experiment, but you get the idea. So B, 0, why not? So you see, it's just like, it's gonna be weird. So you see how we're like offsetting it now from where it was. So that's some of the powers of this. This is where like breakcore stuff like can get really crazy. We could increase the lines per beat to like something like 8. And this is something nice about commands is they fill in the spaces. And if you interpolate things, it'll fill in with interpolation, I believe. So really nice. But now, so people would just go to town with samples from anywhere. There's no way you're going to ever recognize where some of this stuff came from. It'll just be impossible. But that's commands here. And so hopefully I've clarified to you. The only goal was you to know what commands are, see how they can be used and some of the power, and then also give you a demonstration of it in a song. So you saw it being used. So creative solos are just tracks that have used this well. So for example, like this pitch bend here in the bass. And then there's delays. There's all sorts of nifty things going on here. This is volume, and you know that because it's the volume column. So I just encourage you to go research some commands, write a track using commands, maybe embellish what you already had with some commands, and get creative. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe, support me on Patreon, and have a blessed day.
economic, and military. It is still my conviction, as I wrote in 1947, the compelling necessities of the moment leave us no alternative to the maintenance of real and respectable strength.